Holy moly. Does this ugly ass reclaimed wood have something beautiful on the inside? Spend a couple minutes with me. I'll show you how I made this dressing room top and soffit wrap and installed them right back into the very house the subfloor was pulled from.
Hello, I'm Bob. This is my shop. These are my tools. And this is what I'm working on.
We were able to salvage this old-growth pine subfloor from a historic home remodel in Boulder, Colorado. The very first thing I did was use a pair of pliers to pull the nails that I found using a magnet and my eyeballs. Sadly, my jointer shit the bed, so I used this MDF sled on a table saw to get a nice straight edge. Since I obviously wouldn't want to put any marks on this pristine surface of reclaimed wood, I used this blue tape and pencil technique to mark out where my biscuits will go, or dominoes if you can afford it. One little tip I want to point out whenever you're using a biscuit jointer or really any tool is to always make sure that your table or your bed stays flat against the workpiece and it doesn't come up like that. When working with reclaimed wood like this, one of the main goals is to sand the surface as little as possible. So I do everything I can to keep things like glue and pencil marks off of the surface. Here you can see there's a little squeeze out, but that'll clean up easily with a chisel. Although most of this crack will land in the offcut of the final piece and the rest will be filled with epoxy, I go ahead and glue it together since I have clamps and glue out for the rest of the glue up. For some reason I thought using a brush would make it better for the video and easier to see what I was doing rather than just squeezing glue in and using the compressed air. I was wrong. The two things you'll notice here are that I'm using cedar shims yet again as a caul. I use them all the time. And number two is that at that point I only had 1,200 steps for the day. Well, after the glue dried, I went ahead and flipped it over and started prepping for the epoxy. I use flex paste to fill the holes on the back side so that the epoxy doesn't leak through and glue your work to the table and cause a huge mess. Not that I'm speaking from experience. Again, to keep sanding to a minimum, I use blue painter's tape around all the holes and knots, checks, splits, etc., and then fill them with epoxy resin tinted black. I got a little sloppy here, but it got the job done. Sadly, the actual footage of me using the restorer to sand this particular top down, as well as stain and finish it, got lost or otherwise was unusable. But this is the process I use and should give you a pretty good idea. And yes, before you ask, that is a rattle can of spray finish. On a project this size, it's just easier and faster than all the mixing and cleanup required. But here we are back to the real top, with its spar urethane sprayed on there from a rattle can. I ripped a bunch of the material down for the soffit wrap, choosing the width based on a final layout that left me as few rippers as possible. While I was on site installing the soffit, I made a template out of paperboard and hot glue, brought it back to the shop and traced around it with a black Sharpie. Then I took a jigsaw and cut my straight lines with that. I put the painter's tape on the bed or the table of the jigsaw to keep it from marring the surface, or at least it helps a little bit. I then use a flap disc angled back towards the work a little bit to just cut along those contours and inch up to them, and it really makes for a nice tight fit. While we're admiring this edge, I'd like to take this opportunity to say, if you're enjoying this, to hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, you could also hit subscribe and drop me a comment. Really just anything kind of helps me know that I'm on the right track. Back on site, I did have to do a little bit of shaving down just to match some of those rock contours, but all in all, it turned out to be a pretty good fit. It slid right in, and it really looked great at the end. I know the customers were over the moon, and I was really proud of it as well. For those of you paying attention, that crack in the bottom left corner is the one that we glued up earlier. So there you go. Let's recap. We reclaimed the pine subfloor from this historic home and created a beautiful soffit wrap and a dressing room top and reinstalled them back in the same home. I truly appreciate you spending a few minutes with me. Thanks for coming by, and keep your eyes open for more videos. Thanks. Have a great day.